Okay, so continue on from when we left off. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to show you how I made my map, the one that I'm gonna be publishing as an example. So we've got right here a ton of iterations on the level, but map 13 is the one I'm gonna be opening, which is the one that I finished publishing in the end, right? So let's open the Blender scene. It's gonna take a while. And this is what the level looks like in the level editor, right? Let's disable all the visualization stuff so that we have a cleaner view of the map, right? And let's go over and enable the shading so that we can see the textures, right? So, as you can see, we've got a lot of geometry going on in here. We've got all these grass blades in here. We've got all the ground painted up, the houses, etc., right? So let's enable again the visualization, and you can see that we got a lot of locators, triggers, etc., stuff like that. Let me go ahead and show you how I ordered everything up on my scene. So let's hide the script tab so that we can see things more cleanly, and the locator stuff as well. Okay, so first of all, when you're creating a map, when you add new geometry into the level, for example, you go Shift A mesh, create a new cube, right? You're gonna see that if we press the N key, we're gonna have a menu right here called MagickCow properties, right? We got the classic item to see the location, rotation, the tools, the view. Here's where the MagickCow window is located. Right here, you can determine whether you want this mesh to be exported or not. If you uncheck the export option, this will not be exported, so it's not going to be treated as a Magicka mesh geometry, and you can use it for other stuff like Boolean operations, modifiers, or anything you want within Blender related operations, right? If you press export, then the mesh will be added to the final rendered scene. And you can change the type of geometry. You can have a geometry mesh, it can be a collision mesh, it can be water, lava, a nav mesh, a force field, or a camera mesh, right? Camera meshes are basically the path that you define where the camera can point at to prevent it from looking out of bounds. So yeah, you've got many properties here for the mesh that you can edit, such as is visible, if you cast shadows. The has collision option allows MagickCow to generate collision automatically for this mesh. So we'd use the mesh faces itself for collision, and you can change the collision channel. So if you want this to be, for example, stone collision, you can make this a stone mesh. But of course, this thing right here is a little bit expensive when you use automatic mesh collision generation, because it's going to use the mesh itself. So if you're using a very high poly mesh, this is not a good idea. It would usually be better to use a separate collision mesh made by yourself by hand, right? So yeah, anyway, you can see on the scene that we got different stuff like this terrain right here, which we can go ahead and enter edit mode. It's just a giant grid right here where I painted over the material. You can see that it's a type geometry. It generates collisions automatically, and the collision generated is grass. We got all of these meshes around here, and sometimes we got stuff that are separated. You can see that this tree right here is separated into a geometry object which has no collision because it's too high poly, and then this invisible piece right here is the wood collision for the object itself, right? Like this is the actual collision. The leaves don't have to collide anything, you can just phase through them, right? So there's a lot of properties going on in here, and it would be extremely complicated and take a long amount of time to explain everything about how the atom works. But let's go over the basics, right? Let's go over the basics and create, actually, I think I said that I wasn't going to do that, but let's create a new map from zero, right? Let's create a new map. That's going to be real simple. So the process for creating a map is the following. You need to create a simple set of geometry. Let's say, for example, that I have a flat ground in here, right? This is going to be the ground where everything happens, where the player is going to be located. It's going to be a flat grass plane, for example, or a flat stone plane, right? So we can go ahead And the first thing about this is that we're going to go to the N key, we're going to press N, and it will open this panel right here. We can configure it. And as you can see, we got two tabs. We got MagickCow Properties and MagickCow Actions. So the MagickCow Actions allow you to install templates to create a new scene, generate a level model, generate physics entity, vanilla assets. For now, these are experimental. Don't use them. Just close this tab and never look at it again for now. I will tell you when it's actually fully implemented. These two actually work, but they don't work the way I would like them to. Not yet. So I will be changing them in the future to be better. So for now, just ignore this panel, and this button doesn't do anything. This button exists because I wanted to have an automatic way to generate an asset library for Magicka, so that you can have vanilla assets from the game ready to use. I don't have time to do that, and the reason I'm doing that is because I don't want to distribute a ready-made Blender asset library for people to make maps with Magicka assets, because legally I'm not allowed to distribute those assets, right? So for now, ignore that panel. It just doesn't exist for us, right? But this is the panel we care about, the MagickCow Properties panel, which, as you can see, doesn't show anything, but in the other map it did. Well, it's telling you this message right here exactly what is happening. It says no available properties, the export mode is none. You have to go to the scene properties and you set our export mode to map. Don't try to use physics entity yet because it's not fully implemented. You will get some pretty crappy results. I will fix those in the future. For now, map is entirely what I focused on, so it's going to have, it's the thing that works best, right? So let's go over and press map mode. And you can see that suddenly our properties appear on this window and work correctly. So this ground right here, let's say I want this to be a piece of geometry. So this is geometry, right? I want to automatically generate collision because, as you can see, it's just a quad, so it will generate automatically only two giant triangles for the collision. No real big issues in here. Let's say I want the collision to be, well, a stone, because I'm gonna make a stone ground, right? So this is it, pretty much. Let's go ahead and save our file somewhere. Let's imagine we have a directory in here where we're gonna be creating this mod called my mod, right? We're gonna put it in here. Let's call this, for example, tutorial mod.blend, right? You don't have to type .blend, actually. It adds on its own, so we save it. On tutorial mod.blend, we have the map that we just created, okay? So let's go over and add a new material for our ground so that the ground will look like a proper plane in game later on, right? Well, as you can see, we had another material from before. We can actually delete this and set whichever we want. I'm gonna be using the one that I just created, right? So let's save our map. And before we do anything else, let's go ahead and try to play inside of this map, right? We'll be improving the map as we go on this video. So let's go ahead and add the second essential piece of the map, which is a locator. We're gonna, sorry, to add any point data such as triggers, locators, and stuff like that, you go ahead and you add an empty object, and you can press any of these that you want, except image, I guess. You can add a plane axis, for example, and in here you can see that we got a type that is got a different list from this one right here. So this type determines what type of geometry object this will be exported as, and there's different types of geometry. This one right here is going to determine the type of point data this will be exported as. We've got different types of point data. We got root, locator, trigger, particle, bone, and physics entity, right? Excuse me, I had to drink some water. So the root object is going to disappear, or maybe not. I'm not sure what to do with this because it's a legacy leftover of how map exporting used to work in the first version of the exporter, as I explained a long time ago in one of my first videos, if I recall correctly. I had like a conundrum between whether I should have a root object for the scene to be exported or not. In the end, I opted for not having it, but the type is still in here. So a root type is going to be completely ignored by the exporter actually. So for now you should not use it. In the future maybe I will change how the add-on works so it's still in there. The only types you care about are the rest of them, which are locator, trigger, particle, bone, and physics entity. Bone is for animated level parts. So what we want right now is to create a trigger, right? We're gonna be creating a trigger and we're gonna be naming it start. Technically, you may not need the trigger object to exist within the scene for scripts to work, but I keep it just in case someone wants to start to behave differently. But let's just add it for now, right? And what we need to add after that is for locators. So we're not for playing access, we're gonna change its type to locator. And this right here is going to be the place where the players spawn. So we're going to rename this to start 0, right? And we're gonna add 4 of those: start 0, start 1, start 2, and start 3, right? So these locators right here, the name that they have, start 0, start 1, start 2, and start 3, these are special names reserved by Magicka's game engine, which will be used as the spawn point for the full players in multiplayer on campaign. If you want to make versus maps, you can decompile a versus map and see what the name of your star locator needs to be for each team. But basically, just know that for challenges and single player maps and regular campaign maps, what you need to do is have 4 locators named start 0 through 1, and each player will go in one of these locators. So the host will go on start 0, the second player start 1, and so on until the 4th player will be on start 3, right? These are not names that I made myself. This is basically what Magicka's engine uses internally, right? And now that we got this scene right here, okay, we haven't done anything with the material. We haven't specified which texture we want to use, but that doesn't matter because MagickCow automatically generates a default grass material when you don't specify anything about which material you want to use. So let's change this for grass temporarily. Let's go ahead and export this. And we have tutorial mode.json. Right, so we successfully exported the map.json file in here. We got it in here. You can inspect that if you want. Right, it's a giant one-liner. Well, it's pretty small because it's a tiny map, but you can see that we got all the data in here. And if we go over to the texture, here it is generated with a where was it located? Type. I don't remember. I don't see it. Give me a second. Let me go ahead and change the indentation to pretty format, right? File export JSON. Yep. Okay, so we got the buffer data. Here it is. Right, so we got the typing here, and this is the effect deferred. As you can see, it generated a material automatically for you, even though we didn't specify any data for our material. And as you can see, by default, I programmed it to pick the grass lush material, right? So it's just default choice that I made because I thought it looked okay. So this file that we have exported in here, we can now compile with Magicka Pub. So we can go here and say, okay, let's grab this file right here. Go to, sorry, Magicka Pub-p, the tutorial mode.json, or you can use the user interface as I showcased in the other video if you want. I'm gonna put it in here on tutorial mod.xmb, right? I just prefer the command line because I like it. So it's packed in here, and this is the map file, the XMB map file. Now we have a working Magicka map Steam file, right? So let's go ahead and we have this my mod directory here. We're gonna go over and actually make a proper mod to play. So let's call it my mod, and we can go over to the data structure that the game has. So we can go manage browser files, you can see that for any modded XMB content to work, it has to be located on some folder inside of the content directory, right? And if we want a level to work, we have to go into content levels, and we can put it in here anywhere we want. And specifically, I want it to be a challenge, so I'm going to put it in the challenges directory, right? So for us, what this means is that if we want to package this mod, imagine these are the files we're working with. The final mod that we're going to be packing is going to be this directory right here, that folder. So I'm going to be creating inside of my mod a folder named content. Inside, I'm going to create one named levels. And inside of levels, I'm going to create a folder named challenges. And inside of challenges, we can go ahead and paste our XMB file. So let's copy it and take it in here and paste it, right? So now that we got this XMB file going on, this is pretty much the basic requirement to get the mod going. Now what we need is a way for this to be displayed on the challenges windows and to actually register as a real map. So you can see if we go over to my example map that I'm going to publish this evening, right? We have plenty of XMB files in here. One of the things that we need is a XMB file and an LVL file. These are the two essential files for it to work, and we can use any preview file we want. So let's go ahead and create a new file right here, which we're going to be calling, let me open up, by the way, the other file as a reference right here, so that we can have a reference XML file to ensure that it's correct. So if you ever have any doubts, you can just go over to the base game and just look at any of the XML and LVL files that exist. So for example, we got Dungeons Chapter 1 S1 XML. This is the script for the level. And we've got the LVL file for the, I don't know, ice hockey rink. This is what specifies other stuff like the level meshes that we're going to be using, right? So we can open up these two files, for example, right? And we can say, okay, so for this to work, we need to have, at the very least, as you can see, this is all the trigger logic for the game. We can just go ahead and copy all of this stuff and create our own JSON file. So this is how I would do it. Let's call this tutorial mod.xml. It has to have the same name, I think, if I recall correctly. Or, well, yeah, there's another file that doesn't have to have it, but, you know, anyway. And now we got this scene here. We can delete all of this stuff that we copied over from the original one, except the start trigger. So this one, we name it a start as we got it on the scene, right? And let's go ahead and look at all the other properties. So the thing we need here on the header is basically to specify the structure of the type of XML that we're using. We got the scene specifiers going on in here. We got bloom, model, etc. In here, what we need to do, if we go over to my example XML file, right, we can see that we don't really need a lot of the stuff that we have in here. This is the ones that I use for the map that I published. So we can use this as a reference, for example. So the things that we can specify here are the model of our map, whether we have reverb on the map or not, whether we have loom or not, if it's an indoor location or not, the clouds, and where the kill plane is going to be located, right? So let me go ahead and close this up and set this to false, right? So this is a very simple example XML file of what you have to do. All you have to do is ensure that the name of your XML file without the extension is what you use inside of the model tag in here. So now we got this XML file right here, which configures the level that we were going to be created. And what it's going to do is going to say, okay, when I load up the level, I'm going to start up with this model, which is the XML file, the level model that we compiled a while ago. And I'm going to configure the audio to look like this. It's going to be a generic room. mix 80 with reverb. This is going to be the bloom with this blur, with this multiplier, this threshold. The indoor tag determines whether you can use spells such as the lightning bolts that come from the sky with FQASA, because that spell, you know, the weather spells don't work in Magicka 1 when you are indoors, unlike Magicka 2 where they work everywhere. So if you set indoor false, you can use those spells. If you see true, then rain spells and other weather-related spells will not work because you're inside of a room with a roof, right? So that's what the indoor tag is for. The clouds change the visual clouds that appear on top of the screen in Magicka, and the kill plane position basically specifies at what height do you want to have a plane which will kill entities once they fall below this height, right? Like this is useful to prevent players from falling infinitely. I usually just set it to minus 80, but if you ever reach this height, you would obviously want to make it even lower, right? So this is something you can configure on your own, and that's it. And this trigger right here is where the start trigger logic is going to be located. We can just make an empty then inside of it that does nothing, and that's it, right? So those are the basic elements for this XML file. The next thing we need is a tutorial mode file .lpl, right? This specifies the logics. This specifies the logic for the level file. If we go over again to the to this directory, we can open up my example LVL file for my map. You can see that it's very simple. Let's just paste it in here, and you can see that we've got a level tag. Loading specifies the image preview. The name tag specifies the text that we're going to be displaying on the map. So this is basically the localization string for your map. And this right here, the start, just says the name of your scene, the start area that you're going to be executing when you start the map, and this is whether players will be spawned or not when the thing is loaded. So maybe you have a scene that is fully cinematic and no players need to exist within it. So you have it, you start the cinematic, but there are no players inside the map, and that's it, right? With the dialog stack, which is optional, you specified what the XML file with dialogues for this level are. You can just remove this in this case because we are making a tutorial, so I'm not going to add any custom dialogues. The scene, here you can make a list with multiple XML files. This is how maps with multiple sub areas work, such as the RLI area or whatever it's pronounced. You know, the map with Cthulhu, where you got different areas that you can jump between with doors. This is how it works. They have multiple async tags inside of here, specifying different areas, right? So what we want to do in here is go ahead and to make the simplest possible map, just, for example, say tutorial mod. You can see, tutorial mod preview, or you can name it however you want. I just name it like that, the same way that they call it in Magicka. And here, this tag right here is just going to be a string that we'll be inventing in a while. I'm just going to call it DRA tutorial map name, DRA tutorial map description, right? Well, rather than tutorial, maybe tut for short. Yeah, tutorial is okay. So I'll be explaining what this means. Basically, these are completely custom-made strings that you invent on your own, right? These are string identifiers that the game will use internally to determine what what text it's going to have to display when it loads the language file, right? So this way you can define within the game logic, the game defines this string as the one for the location that we're looking for this string, and internally you say, okay, when we are looking for this text, if we're playing with English, we're going to display this. If we're playing in Russian, we're going to display this. If we're playing in Spanish, we're going to display that, right? So this is the way that the game ensures that you can get a translation system going on. So basically create a completely custom unique identifier. I will explain my logic behind how it works. For me, I use DRA, which are my initials of my name, and then the name of the whatever initials or identifier for my map, and then whatever is it that this object is, right? So the reason I do it like that is to ensure that we have no collisions, because if I just called it map name, right, like this, it's going to collide. It's going to collide obviously at some point, because it's such a generic name that someone else who's making another mod could name their own localization string map name. And localization strings need to be unique when they are from a specific file, right? Like they need to be unique within the program to ensure that there are no collisions, so that you display the correct string. So to avoid having any issues, since there are no namespaces within localization strings, what I do is use my name initials and the initial of my map name as a namespace of sorts, because that way I reduce the possibility of there ever being any collisions greatly, right? Like I make this unique for my own maps. And for example, if my name were to be, I don't know, my username on Discord, let's say it's potatoes, rather than using my real name initials, I could just say potatoes, tutorial map name, right? This is another string I could use, but obviously potatoes is much more generic than DRA, I think. So there's a greater chance that there could be a collision where someone could use tutorial potatoes tutorial map name, right? But for this tutorial, we can actually roll with that. Yeah, let's go potatoes tutorial map description. Something like this is okay, right? Like I'm just explaining the things that we have. And here we got the tutorial mod LVL file, which is a very bad name, by the way. Tutorial mod, just like that. Someone will at some point create a tutorial mod that has the exact same name, and it will collide. And if someone wants to install both mods at the same time, we're gonna have issues, right? So I want to remark how important it is for people to do namespacing correctly from the beginning, so that we don't have these issues in the future. But for now, this tutorial mod is just an example, so it doesn't really matter. Let's just go ahead and call it tutorial mod. Well, you can see that the thing is just the name of the XMB file without the XMB extension, so it's tutorial mod, right? And this right here is the XML file, so tutorial mod.xml. Right? That should be it. We pretty much have this going, and that's all we need. Now let's go ahead and add the localization strings on the preview. So for the preview, I'm going to go ahead and take a screenshot of this. I'm gonna go to Paint, and I'm going to cut this section up more or less like this. I don't know. Something like that. And we're gonna go ahead. I'm going to look for a challenge XMB file for a preview. For example, we can pick up the Necro preview file that we decompiled before on the video. So if we go over to Scratch Buffer, My Textures, nope, it was on My Levels, Necro preview. Okay, so we open up this file and we can check out that the resolution that it has is 768 by 256. I recommend using the exact same resolution as Magicka, but you can use anything you want. And this screenshot I took is 690 blah blah blah, right? So we can just change the resolution and keep it to be the exact same resolution, so that we don't have any issues, right? Oh, wait a minute. Let me do that again. Without selecting anything. 768, 256, ahí está. There we go. Now it's got the same resolution, right? So we can go ahead and save that as our texture. So preview. Let me go ahead and snatch that preview file and move it over to where it needs to be, which is on the where was I? Challenges. There we go. We got the file here, so we can go over. Well, let me put it on the original file. Wait, hold on. Sorry, my bad. Cut it. Put it here. And now we can go ahead and say Magicka pop -p my mod preview.png into preview.xmb. And it's compiled. We got the preview XMB file. let's go ahead and put it here. It's going to be tutorial mod preview XMB, which is the file name that I chose before. If we go here, you can see it's tutorial mode preview. Let's just copy and paste just in case. Yeah, it's exactly the same name. So this will be the image that we see when we scroll on the level menu and challenges to preview the map. So that's it. And now the last thing before being able to put up the map is the localization string. So we can go over to Magicka, content, and we got this languages directory. So let's go ahead, go into content, create a directory named languages. And instead of languages, you can create a directory for every single language you want to support. So Dutch, English, French, Hungarian, Italian, Polish, Russian, and Spanish. I think that's what they mean. I think so, right? Yeah. So for now, let's only make one for English. So we make an ENG folder. You can make one for every single language. And instead of then, you will have to add a file which will, it can be named anything, but I would recommend naming it the same, but it doesn't have any technical differences, right? Like, what matters is the localization string uniqueness within each file. So the name of your file itself is irrelevant. But let's go ahead and open up something like the Wizard Castle example, right? So this right here contains the log tables for all of the elements for the tutorial. Sorry, for the tutorial map is named inside of the files, but this is the Wizard Castle, right? If we open up the Wizard Castle, you can see that we got this workbook right here with a bunch of different worksheets. So we got dialogues, a point of interest, right? This name doesn't really matter that much, but I would recommend that for consistency's sake, we get it to look like the same. So when we're making a new one of these, you can just go ahead and copy a reference XML file from the base game, right? We create a new file of our own, and we can call it tutorial mod.logtable.xml, right? And we can edit this XML file and paste on top of it the XML data that we copy pasted from Magicka, right? From the example file. So let's go ahead and look at the contents that we have. So we have a XML version, the type of application for an Excel sheet. So this is what they used to edit this file. Actually, it was made in Excel and exported as a worksheet, as you can see. But yeah, like literally, if you look at this, it was literally a Microsoft Office Excel worksheet that they edited with this data, right? But we can do it by hand if you don't want to use Excel or anything like that, right? It's just that you can do it however you want. So what we need is have inside of the workbook a worksheet for each type of data, right? And these worksheets right here, they each need to have a table. And this table inside of each worksheet contains the data that we want to work with, right? So let's go ahead and only keep one worksheet, right? And delete the other one. As you can see, this worksheet right here, it's named DIA for dialogue. For maps, if I recall correctly, it's maps or map, only like that. Let me check the one I made for my mod, how I called it. It's, where is it located, dude? ENG, here it is. So we have the, let's see if Ruins has it, dialogue and point of interest. Nope. So we should probably, I think I found it on somewhere else, like a challenges window. Well, you can see that basically the name of the worksheet like literally doesn't matter. It's just for yourself to, get a grip of what exactly each worksheet represents, right? But again, I recommend just naming it something that is intuitive for people who are looking at the data. You could literally just name it XYZ if you want it, right? Just make sure that it's something that people can understand when they look at it and don't blow their head off trying to figure out what the fuck you're doing here, right? Then instead of here, we got the table with all the data and we got multiple rows in here, right? So the first row defines the structure that we have. The structure is ID, English, comments, and reference texts. So from this table right here, if you look at the rest of the entries, each of them have the unique identifier, the text. This references another string that is localized as well, and it will paste it in there, right? And as you can see, there's a lot of duplicated data in here. You can see that this text is repeated in here again and again. This is not necessary, okay? This is actually redundant data that we do not need in any way, shape, or form. Both comments and reference texts are literally useless to the game, so you can just remove these two cells in here. The only data that you need to keep is the ID and the ENG, right? For other languages, I think you need to change that to the text itself, but you know, whatever, right? The ID is the entry where you will be typing this string, and the ENG is where you will be typing the actual string in English, right? So let's go ahead and remove all other rows and only keep the one that we care about. So let's go to the end of the file, delete it, and here we have it. So now we can remove all of this stuff right here, because both comments and references are actually just comments. In references, they sometimes type something like, this string is a reference to Adventure Time, or something like that. I remember reading in another file, right? So we don't need any of that in here. So this is the structure. The first row always defines the structure of the table, and the rest of the rows just define data. So the strings that we made up for our tutorial mod LVL file, as you remember, is potatoes tutorial map name. Let's just remove potatoes. It's actually gonna be tutorial map. Let's just name it tutorial mod map name, for example, right? Map description. I know I broke the rule that I mentioned myself of trying to be, you know, namespaced, but it's just a tutorial, so I don't really care that much. So we have our entry for the tutorial name. We're gonna call it, we're gonna write the string, for example, the tutorial map name, for example, right? That's literally the name of the map. And now let's go ahead and copy this row right here to have an entry for the tutorial map description, right? And this is going to be the tutorial map description. Make it a little bit longer because this is a description. We must talk about what the fuck this map does. Okay, something like that, right? So now that we got all of this data set up, if we've done everything correctly, the map should be ready, right? So we got this in here. So this directory right here is the final mod directory with its content, languages, English, log tables, levels, challenges, whatever, right? So now to install the mod, basically, you know, you got this content directory. You can either copy and paste this on top of your content directory and it will automatically work. Let's just do it on my Steam Magicka install. So if we go over to Magicka and browse local files, we can just paste it in here and that's it. The mod is now installed, right? Or if you want, you can do things with my program. First, let's just boot the game, right? I'm gonna start up Magicka and we're gonna enter the tutorial map. It's gonna take a while to load because, you know, I'm using the Magicka 1.10 on Steam, so this one takes a while to load. Come on. Okay, there we go. So if we go to challenges, it's loading up. Let's change the level, and you can see we got the tutorial map name with this picture right here. And if we click it, it says the tutorial map description. Make it a little bit longer because this is a description. We must talk about what the fuck this map does, right? And that's pretty much it. Now we can just press start and we should be able to play the map if I didn't do anything wrong. If I did do something wrong, this will crash. Okay, so this is a moment of truth. If it crashes, it will be a learning experience for debugging. If not, then, you know, we'll talk about debugging in another video. Okay, excellent. So this is the map, which has a fatal flaw, and that is that I forgot to add any light, but as you can see, there's the ground. Yep, here's the ground, which is the grass texture, and if we continue walking, we can fall off the edge because this is where the ground ends, and we will basically die out of bounds. Right? We reached the kill plane and we died. So, whoops, no, I didn't mean to press that. Wait. Okay, so let's go back into Blender. Now that we got a working map, this is just going to snowball from here, right? Like right now, we set up all of the ugly stuff, the location, the localization stuff. We got the XML files, the LVL files, all of that stuff. It's annoying as fuck, and it's the ugly part that takes a bit to set up at first. Once you actually know how it works, you may get yourself like a preset prepared to make a new map. I will create some options to automatically generate stuff like that in the future. Here I will maybe add a button for that, so that when it exports, it also generates that data. But for the most part, in my opinion, all of the XML and LVL stuff should be fully customized by the user. I don't think we should have any real need for automatic generation because it's a convenience, but it may lead to everyone using the exact same pattern, and this could kill creativity and research because some maps don't really need every single tag to be present, right? So that's just stuff to consider, that you can customize a lot more of stuff. So do whatever you want with this information, but I'll probably create a default mode in the future so that we don't have to do all of this boilerplate at some point in the future. But once it's done, it's really easy to add stuff. So for example, we can go ahead and add a new light. So let's talk about lighting. We can go ahead, create a spotlight or a sunlight or a point light. Right? The main two types of light that Magicka supports are point lights, which is basically stuff like a light bulb, a torch, a campfire, basically a singular light source that you can physically see in the level, and the sunlight, which is basically a directional light that's simulating a giant light in the sky that is the sun. Right? Magicka's code has support for spotlights, but I don't think they are ever used. I actually checked plenty of maps, and literally I have never found a single map that uses a spotlight. As a matter of fact, I think I remember trying to use a spotlight once long ago, and it doesn't work because it's not implemented. Or maybe I was wrong. I don't remember, but I think that it's not actually implemented. So for now, use point light and suns. You can experiment with the spotlights, but if I recall correctly, Magicka's engine doesn't really implement them, but it does have an option for them, so they shouldn't crash or anything like that, right? But yeah, experiment with this stuff because you can actually find custom engine mods at some point in the future with people that want to add custom light types support. So yeah. And here on this panel, you can see the actual data for your light. You've got the point, direction, and spot. So let's make this a directional light. Or we can make this a point light, but let's make it directional, right? And let's go ahead and rotate this a little bit like this. So this is right here simulating right now that it's the sun, and this is the direction in which the sun is pointing, right? So let's change the properties of the sun. So we can make the sun be a little bit yellowish to simulate that it's, not a LED, a giant LED on the sky. It's an actual light source, so the light of the sun is always a little bit tiny, more yellowish, reddish, because it's a star, right? This right here, the ambient color, since the sky is blue, it's usually going to be blue, right? But whatever color the sky is meant to be, that's usually the type of color you want to use for your ambient color, right? It will affect properties such as reflective surfaces like water, metals, etc. The light variation property changes what type of variation your lights will have. So this is usually used for candles, fires, anything like that, or blinking lights like a broken light bulb. The sun does not really have light variation in any map of Magicka that I found because, well, if I look at the sky right now out the window, I don't really think the light of the sun is flickering like it would be pretty fucked up if the sun suddenly turned off, you know? So since it's not a giant LED on the sky, then we obviously don't want variation on the skylight, but we can do that if you want it, right? So the reach is the radius of the light. I called it reach because it's like distance rather than radius. For stuff like Spotlight, but I think that it's a pretty fucking retarded name. I will be changing it to radius at some point in the future again. It's just visual stuff. So just know that reach is the radius, which for directional lights doesn't matter at all. Here, we can use attenuation or not, which again, directional light doesn't matter at all because it's the sun. Here we can change other stuff like the intensity, the specular. We can change whether it casts shadows or not. That's it, right? And the important one is the shadow map size. I set it to 64 by default, but most lights in Magicka actually use 256 shadow map size. So this is how detailed your shadows can be with this light. And I recommend using 256. Magicka actually does a really good job optimizing the shadow side of the code. It's not too optimized actually, but it's like really fucking good for what it is. Like, it surprises me, but yeah, it works really nicely. So let's just pick a 256 light and that's it, right? So and with this we got a light added to the scene, right? So we can go ahead and again compile our map. So we say -p the JSON into mod xmb, and we got our new file, and we can go ahead, go into my mod, copy the xmb file and paste it where it needs to be, right? So we can just replace that, and we can again just copy the content directory into the Magicka directory here on Steam. We can just replace the files, and let's go in game, and we can press start again to load up the map once more, and it should load up the new xmb file. It didn't. Why? Give me a second. Oh yeah, I know why. I forgot to export on Blender. So file, export, tutorial mode JSON. Or I did. Wait, I'm not sure. I think I didn't. So let's export it, and let's go ahead and compile it again. Let me go over to the XMB file, place it in challenges. We go to content, we copy and paste this here. So we replace the files. We go to Magicka, we go challenges and tutorial map. We start it up. And it's gonna take a while to load, and here we are. Finally, we have lights. Okay, yeah. So pretty nice. Well, let's go ahead and add a little bit more stuff. So as you can see, the default texture, as I mentioned a long time ago before in the video, is by default the grass texture because we didn't specify anything. The last thing I want to talk about in this video is talking about making materials, right? So if we go over here, this material is named material 001. You can name it whatever you want. We can say, for example, ground material or whatever you want, right? This doesn't really affect us in any way, to be honest. It's just for you to have an easier time working within Blender. But you know, what I want to make very clear is that as of now, due to the way that Magicka works, as I said before, it uses relative paths for the textures, right? They are going to be, since they are relative to paths, right, to the asset itself, what I did, and they use a lot of configuration that is not really one-to-one translatable to Blender, what I did is separate the visualization in Blender from the actual implementation in Magicka. What this means for us is that the actual implementation of our material, what actually gets placed into the final XMB file, is not necessarily the same thing we're going to be seeing in Blender, right? So you can customize how you visualize your materials in Blender, but since there are limitations to the material system in Magicka, we don't really have the ability to translate the nodes one-to-one, right? So let's talk about that. So first, let's make a little visualization. That is, I want to be able to see things in a way that is cool. So we have this directory that I talked about before, which is my Magicka playground, where I've got all of my textures exported, right? I'm going to be creating a ground that is a rock, right? So we go to textures, surface, structure, stone. You can see that we got this ground right here that is made of stone. So we can, for example, say this one, the green checker floor, right, is what I want to use. And I want to use this normal map right here. Well, what we can be doing is say, okay, if I want the floor to be of this material, the first step in Blender is the visualization. This is optional. This is obviously only for you to make things easier to see, right? So we can go ahead and say, okay, let me go over and enter the shading viewport, and in here create an image texture node and connect it into the base color of our principal BSDF. Here we can open up and enter this directory and select my floor texture, which is the floor green checkers .png, and here it is, right? So now I'm visualizing this. In the future, I will modify MagickCow so that this is enough, and it will actually scan this node setup in here and say, hey, you're using this on the base color. This means that this is going to be the texture you're going to be using. So let's try to compute a relative path. But that's the thing. Right now, this texture node in Blender is pointing literally to this file right here, right? So unless my blend file is relative to it, and then I go ahead and do external data, make paths relative, I will not be able to get the correct paths out of this, right? So that's why I prefer to make users have the paths relative, manually reading out, because right now my mod is located in D my mod, right? So this is where the data is located, in D my mod. This is where the JSON file is located. This is where the blend file is located. But my texture that I use for visualization is on the F drive, my stuff, Magicka playground, content, blah, 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 right? If my blend file was located here, for example, in challenges, if I had my blend file in here, I would not have any issues. I would 100% be able to do anything I wanted without any issues, right? Like I could just go ahead and modify the code of the MagickCow exporter to read from here, execute the make paths relative operation, and that way we would be able to access the dot textures slash nature, whatever, right? Or structures, I think is where it's located, you know, path, right? But since they are on different directories, there is no relative path. They are literally on different hard drives, actually. So that doesn't work, right? So that's bad in this case, which is why, to prevent this issue from biting anyone in the ass and breaking the export entirely, I gave different options to people. So the different options that exist, if we go to materials, this is just the visualization. The actual material data, if we go over here, is located down here in the MagickCow material properties. And here you can see that we have that window that we saw before in this panel. Well, this panel right here contains a bunch of data. You can see that the material type can be changed to the third, additive, water, lava, force field. And in the future, as I mentioned before, I have a decompiler for the shader types and a work in progress for making custom shaders. So in the future, we should be able to support different types of custom materials, which is why I don't like this panel, because it's got a bunch of hard-coded types, right? So the modes we have present are external JSON file, internal material panel, and internal JSON document, right? Ignore internal material panel. This one is bad. Don't use this mode, right? Like I'm going to deprecate it in the next version. Like when I have time to keep working on MagickCow, this panel is going to stop existing and it will be replaced by something completely different, which is the material node setup that I was talking about, right? So this, completely ignore it. Don't use it ever, right? Because as a matter of fact, the exported code is not even fully implemented for this panel, right? It's too much work for what it's worth. It's too much work, so don't use it. It's just annoying to copy data over between different shaders. So it's better that you either use external JSON document or internal JSON document. So the external JSON document lets you specify the path relative to the base directory that we got right here, for a JSON file which contains the shader code, like this one right here. This is what I'm talking about. It's not real shader code. It's actually just the material configuration for a material in game, right? The external JSON file mode is a side effect of how things worked in the first version of MagickCow. It literally should not be used nowadays, in my opinion. Because what it does is it allows you to reuse external files that are external to your blend file as a way to specify configuration for different materials, right? So it was the only way to do things at first because of the fact that I didn't know how to use text data blocks properly at first when I was making the add-on. But nowadays, the option you should be using, and the one that will remain in the future, I will remove both this and this in the future, is this internal material panel. Sorry, internal JSON document, right? We'll be talking about each of them. So the internal material panel lets you select what type of material you're going to be using. You can go deferred, additive material, whatever, right? You can configure your data here. You can change the paths, change the color. It's pretty nice, but it's annoying to work with in the long run and doesn't really work, right? So this panel is deprecated. The external JSON document is annoying because it requires specifying a base path here. But if we delete this base path and keep it empty, we could actually just specify a absolute path in here, right? And the way that it works is that we can literally just go ahead and say, okay, this is where my mod is located. I'm gonna go ahead and say my material, or well, ground material.json, for example, right? And I edit this out, and we can paste this stuff in here, and now we got a material configuration file in here, right? Which we can use to say, okay, I'm gonna load up the file that is in the my mod slash, or well, we can go over to the scene configuration, say that the base path is the my mod, and the file we're loading is ground material.json, right? And when we export this file, it will use this data right here as the JSON data for the generated material when we press the export button, right? And that's okay, because you can have multiple objects, different materials, reference the same JSON, and that's okay, that's great, but it's not really ideal. So what we have now, which is what everyone should be using, is the internal JSON document. So this is the most, I guess, professional or best way to work. Internal JSON document basically points to a JSON document that is internal to the blend file itself. This means that you actually have way less clutter, way less dependencies on external files. You don't have to worry about relative paths or anything like that. You have way less likelihood of breaking your file when you export. Like, this is the best option. It's the last one I implemented, and it's the best one because it lets you make free-form materials of any type. You can even make custom dictionaries, so you could make custom shaders if you want right now, with the experimental side of the Magicka app tool for custom shader support, which is not fully implemented in the public release. But you can reuse this version right here in the future for that stuff, right? So that's why I like this. That's why the other options should be completely removed, because they are not good. They are trash. They are really bad, and they are an old way of doing things that existed as a consequence of the fact that this tool has been evolving over time, and I wasn't really sure how to implement stuff until I arrived at this final design. So basically, ignore every single option, only use internal JSON document, and that's the way you're gonna be happy with your life. Literally, is the only way you can be happy when using this tool, and you will not suicide or kill yourself in any way. So this panel right here is pretty nice. Here you can select a text document internal to the blend file. Right now there are no text documents, so no results were found. And we have an option to create a new text document. So you can press this button right here, and it will create a new data block and put it in here. But we don't want that yet. Why? Well, first, let me explain. As you can see, when we have no data block selected, we say no text data block was selected. And it's a warning, which means that this text is empty. As you can see, we didn't select anything because it failed to find anything. There's nothing, right? So what this means for us is that this will be exported as the green grass texture that we saw on the map before, right? That's what my add-on does by default. It is a very permissive add-on. If you forget to do something, rather than making your game crash or throwing any warnings, I prefer to replace the material silently with something that works, but is not really, you know, what you originally wanted, right? So if you press this button right here, this will create a new effect, which we can now edit. You see the warning is gone. If we press this button right here, we can edit effect, and a text editor window opens up in here. But as you can see, it's only one line and it's empty. So obviously this is not a valid effect. This is completely empty for you to create a custom effect of your own. So you can say, okay, type is the third effect, whatever, right? You know, you can write out everything by hand, and that's very annoying. So we don't want that. So we can just unlink and delete this text file and get rid of it. As you can see, I erased it because we have better options. We have buttons in here that, as you can see, creates a new effect of different types. So we got new effect. This one does the same as this one right here. It creates a new empty effect. This one creates a deferred effect, right? And this is an additive, a water, lava, and force field effect. So this basically contains the boilerplate code for creating custom effects of each type, right? And this is what the Magicka Pop add-on uses. So we can go ahead and say what I want for the ground is a new deferred effect. So we can just press this button, we got effect deferred, and we can edit it, right? And the cool thing about this being a data block, well, as you can see, the text is in here, is that this is linked as a pointer, and this is a pointer as well. So we can rename this if we want, rather than having effect deferred, because it's a very generic name. And we could even go ahead and say, create a new water effect, right? Now we got another effect in here. If we press edit, we can open up another text editor, and you can see that we got the effect water in here. They automatically change, but we obviously want the deferred effect. The water effect can stay, it doesn't matter to us. We got the deferred effect, which is what we wanted to edit. We're in here, and this is the one we're going to be using. And if you have multiple deferred effects, we can go ahead and add many of those. You can see it's pretty annoying because they are deferred effect 1, 2, 3, 4. Who the fuck is the right one? Well, you're gonna lose a lot of time like this trying to figure it out. So to prevent any issues, you know, we named the material ground material. We can say ground material effect, for example, or ground material or ground effect or anything you want, because this name, since this is a data block for text, is completely independent from the data blocks for material. So you can even have the same name for them if you want, right? But I like changing it to, you know, be different so that I know that I'm working with an effect data block and with a material data block. You can see that then our material, which is ground material, is referencing the ground material effect, right? So the ground material effect, it's got this stuff right here. We got the grass lush texture by default. So if we go over to the folder that we were before in, you can see that we got contents, levels, we got in here textures, object, structure, right? Well, what we're going here is textures, object, structure, and we can go ahead and pick the material that we wanted. And the material that we wanted is somewhere around here. Where was it? We had the PNG for us. I saw it before. Hold on, let me go back to content, levels, textures, object, structure, not object. I'm wrong. Sorry. It's textures, surface, structure, stone. Okay, this is where we have the texture that we referenced before, right? This is the one, right? So my bad. Let's fix up the path. So it was textures, surface, a structure, a stone, and here we can go ahead and say the name of the file, which is this one right here. Okay, and we also have this other file, which is the normal. So let's just pick it up and we can go ahead and temporarily put it in here. Let me go ahead and copy this string. We got the normal texture. We paste it in here. We can take this one and then replace it in here. And now we got a proper ground texture going on. So this is the configuration in JSON format for our material. So this is the visualization side of things on the material nodes, and this is the actual configuration for what Blender will display, right? If we go back to my map, you can see that the water looks like a bunch of blue squares. That is completely independent from the fact that within the game actually looks like a proper water shader, right? That's why I like having the visualization separated from the actual code, because in my thing I didn't have to make any work to actually get a visualization that looks similar to the one that works inside of Magicka's render engine, right? So I didn't have to replicate all the refraction stuff for the water. But in the future it would be cool to have a node that does that by default, so I will be working on that as well when I have time. Obviously not today. Today I'm spending on making tutorials and finishing everything up before publishing the files, right? So now that we have this set up like this, I took a long time to explain everything, but as you can see, it's very short. It's like pressing 2 buttons to set it up and writing 2 strings, right? We can just go ahead and export this JSON file, right? And that's it. Now that we've exported it, we can go ahead, compile the map. Well, we can first go over to the tutorial mod JSON. Let's reload it. And as you can see, if we go over to our vertex buffer, we got the root node. Here's the effect. You can see that we got the floor green checker. So the path has been updated correctly to reference this texture. And we can go ahead and compile. So we compile the mod JSON into tutorial mod XMB, right? So let me pick the XMB file and replace it in here. And let's go back in here, copy content, go into the Magicka directory, paste it in here, and we can go back in game and play, right? So we go to challenges, tutorial map name, we can start it up. And as you can see, the ground just changed into this object. It now looks with the texture that we wanted to use, right? Which is pretty nice. So yeah, that's all there really is to it. You can now do obviously more complex stuff. These are the basics. You can model crates, you can model meshes and stuff like that, right? And create your own materials and asset libraries for your own purposes. I'm going to show you something, right, that I have been working on, which we've got somewhere. MagickCow library, here it is. Okay, so this blend file right here is a asset library that I've been creating in Blender, right? All of these meshes that you see right here are divided between Danny, Magicka, and Test. Test is where I do some weird tests. Danny are meshes that I made myself. Even if they use textures and materials from the base game, these meshes I modeled myself from the ground up. And Magicka are models that I extracted from Magicka when I finished making the importer code, right? So as you can see, they've got this little library icon here. That's basically, I go over into my scene and I can enable visibility for different sections, right? And I work on the models and I mark them as assets, and that way I can reuse this data in here, right? So we can do the same, right? When you're working with your own mods, you can create your own custom asset libraries to make it easier to reuse data across your levels if you want, right? Rather than creating every single mesh from the ground up every time you make your map. So you can see that I've got this material right here, Danny material water meal, that's got this text file in here with this script in here. This is the mesh of the door, another door that uses the same material, house, another house, right? What I can do now, right, if I want, I can open up my level and go back to my mod and oops, sorry, my mod, right? And in here, I can open up a new window with my custom asset library enabled, right? And I can start adding up stuff. Like I can, for example, say, let's add a crate to the scene here. Let's add a few barrels, right? So as you can see, creating an asset library, obviously I'm not going to make a tutorial on how to handle asset libraries because that's a Blender specific feature. So you should probably, if you want to learn more about this, look up a tutorial on the internet about how to use asset libraries, right? But as you can see, I can very quickly throw together a little map without much effort, right? I can just go ahead and do stuff kind of dirtily, but you know, I now have a working map for Magicka with my assets, right? I didn't have to spend time modeling every single house or copying it over and over again. Um, So asset libraries are pretty nice because they allow you to make stuff much faster without having to, you can now reuse all of this stuff that you've been working on creating all throughout your map without having to worry about any issues. So yeah, come on. The fucking interface for Blender is pretty bad though. It sometimes happens that it bugs out like this. Makes you waste a little bit of time, but as you can see, it works sort of like a level editor. And yeah, I can just go ahead and, for example, let me change the visualization to make this a little bit more tiled, and we can just go ahead and file, export JSON, tutorial mode JSON, and we can go ahead and recompile the map. It took a little while longer because there's more data inside of the map, right? And if we go to my mod, we got the XMB file here. We can go ahead, levels, challenges, paste it in here, right? And we can go ahead and copy the mod again, right? So we go into content, paste it in here. We go over to select challenges, pick the tutorial map. We start it up. And if I didn't do anything wrong that will crash, you will see that we got our scene going on with the little house, the barrels, the chair, everything is in here, right? And well, the chair doesn't have collision actually because I disabled it purposely. Basically it's because it's way too high poly in my opinion, and I don't want any issues from wasting too many collision polygons on this surface. So since every single other model is a box, I leave the collision enabled by default. For chairs, I usually just plop a box on top of them manually every single time I make a chair, but you can improve that with more complex asset libraries. And as you can see, we got the ground, the little border in here, looking pretty cool. And we threw together a little room in no time with no effort, right? So pretty cool. I know the tutorial is a little bit long, but I think I explained pretty much all the basics about how to make mods, right? So the only sort of difference here is obviously that I've been showing you how to do it by copy pasting files on top of the actual Magicka install. When you've got your mod ready, the reason I copy pasted the files on top in here is because I was debugging during runtime without closing Magicka, and because I don't care about dirtying up this install. This is my mod testing grounds install that I've got, right? When you actually want a mod to be properly installed, in my opinion, you should, now we got this mod ready, let's copy it over and let's go to our Magicka directory, to mods, and we paste it in here, right? You should probably use Magicka Pub GUI, right? Because now with Magicka Pub GUI, we can go over to profiles and we can say, okay, this is my install that's modded. We can edit it over and say, let's enable my mod, right? So let's apply the changes. Let's reinstall. The update is being prepared. Sorry, the install is being prepared. It's gonna take a little while. It's been successfully installed, and now we can go ahead and play the game, right? And when we press to play the game, it's going to open up, and we didn't really have to dirty up the install by manually adding the files in there. As I explained in the other video, this is the virtual file system, so it's entirely handled by the machine for us, right? And here is the game opening up. And as you can see, It's gonna load up in a little while. We go over to challenges, and we got it. Here it is, right? Pretty cool. We can select the map. This is now a different install from the one that we were using a while ago. So it now has the mod as well, and it's working quite nicely. And this is what the user front-facing side of things should be like, right? Like just pressing the install button and it's done. The other process is for when you are developing, because it's a bit easier than just pressing the reinstall button every single time. You know, you don't have to close the game. So yeah, that's because Magicka can sort of reload some assets. Basically, the maps are reloaded every single time you want to load the map. Things like localization strings are loaded only when the game is booted, so that's different. You need to close and open the game again if you add a new file for log strings and stuff. But anyway, I digress. So all of this stuff was pretty much the way that it's going to be working. Hopefully it will be enough, good enough of a tutorial to explain how things work. So yeah, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.